What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we have some red action over here in the cryptocurrency market. Technically, prices are still just ranged from where they've been for the last week. However, the concerns are of another leg down, of course, if there's going to be further contagion in this market. We'll kind of run through some of the developments that have happened in the last 48 hours. As for looking at the price chart with Bitcoin, obviously it took out its low from back there in June. It's been waddling right in here. We've seen this happen before in events of this magnitude, pausing and then continuing once contagion really sets in. From a technical level, we've discussed this on Monday. So many things have broken over here on Bitcoin in regards to how previous bottoms have come in for Bitcoin. So definitely cautious about Bitcoin in general at this point. One of the things we do see on here, at least from Coinbase, is how much volume came in here. So if you look at the selling volume that took place here for Bitcoin back there on Wednesday, November 9th, it was actually the most selling volume on Coinbase in history. It even beat out what happened during the C19 sell-off. When you go back and you look through, hey, when do we have these high volume events actually end up occurring? They have a tendency to mark reversal points that happen in here. High volume usually marks a turnaround point or the climatic moment of a move. Now with C19, when we had that come in here, notice what happened the very next day. You had overwhelming buy volume come in, right? We did see buy volume come in here for Bitcoin, but it didn't beat out the amount of volume that we saw in regards to selling. And of course, the worry is contagion. I've been personally trying to think of names that would be worrying. And a lot of people like to credit the Bitcoin bull run to Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust and how much Bitcoin they were adding to it and buying to it. And I've been thinking to myself, you know what? I haven't seen anything posted from Barry Silbert in the last few days. So I went around and looked at Barry Silbert. I looked at Digital Currency Group. I looked at Grayscale. And I noticed that none of them have posted since last week. And I made this tweet here yesterday on Twitter that, hey, Grayscale, Digital Currency Group, Barry Silbert, pretty quiet over there. Grayscale writes a tweet just about every day and hasn't since pre-FTX bankruptcy on November 8th. None of the accounts have acknowledged the events this past week. Unusually quiet. You guys okay? So to understand these accounts, Barry Silbert is the founder and CEO of Digital Currency Group, which is the parent company of Grayscale, Genesis Trading, CoinDesk, TradeBlock, Foundry Services, and Luno Global. So he's the CEO of Digital Currency Group. Heading over to Digital Currency Group, we build, buy, and invest in Bitcoin and blockchain companies, which is the parent company of Grayscale, Genesis Trading, CoinDesk, Foundry Services, Luno Global, TradeBlock, and then Grayscale, helping investors access the digital economy through secure, compliant, and future-forward investment products since 2013. The thing about Grayscale in here is that they have not been tweeting in some time. You can see the last time they had any type of tweet was just a retweet on November 9th. But as for them actually tweeting from their account, the last time they did was on November 8th. And you can actually go through their profile in here and look to see they actually tend to tweet more than once per day, or at least once per day. Here we are, we're still on November 4th. Look how many times these tweets are coming through in here. But then you head up to the top and you see, hey, the last time they tweeted was November 8th. And the last time they even just retweeted was November 9th. So what makes that significant? We could see it over here on the chart, right? November 8th and November 9th were these moments right here. The high volume event on Coinbase is November 9th. And things started really breaking here on November 8th. And then on November 10th is when SBF and FTX announced that they have filed for bankruptcy. And for some reason, these guys are just so quiet, it's very loud. So I'm asking, hey, what's going on, guys? You guys are some of the most active people in the crypto universe. What's happening here? And well, this morning, Digital Currency Group, again, the parent company of all of these companies, one of them being Genesis Trading, they tweet out this morning, today Genesis Global Capital, Genesis Trading's lending business made the difficult decision to temporarily suspend redemptions and new loan originations. This decision was made in response to the extreme market dislocation and loss of industry confidence caused by the FTX implosion. The impact lies with the lending business at Genesis and does not affect Genesis Trading or custody business. Importantly, this temporary action has no impact on the business operations of Digital Currency Group and our other wholly owned subsidiaries. So, this is the first time we've seen Digital Currency Group since November 8th, right? So we have Digital Currency Group silent. You got Grayscale silent, and you got Barry Silbert, who hasn't done anything more than just kind of retweet a couple random tweets back on November 11th. He has broke his silence today and has retweeted these tweets from Digital Currency Group as well. But these are really big players in this market, Digital Currency Group and Grayscale. They were very, very quiet for the last week. And so the first time they're actually saying anything, they're saying, hey, we're halting stuff. And as we can see, Dylan LeClaire screaming, get your Bitcoin away from yield products now. And we're just seeing this repeatedly. If you're leaving your money on these exchanges or in these products during a moment like this, one by one, these things fall. So there's a very strong push for self-custody. And well, hey, what do you know? After breaking their silence for the last 8 days, Grayscale has finally come out and said something here in the last 7 minutes. Now that Digital Currency Group has acknowledged Genesis Trading has suspended redemptions and new loan originations. We could see Grayscale says, in the wake of recent events, our investors should know that the safety and security of the holdings underlying Grayscale digital asset products are unaffected. Today, Genesis Global Capital, a subsidiary of Grayscale's affiliate, Genesis Global Trading, announced that it temporarily suspending redemptions and new loan originations. Genesis Global Capital is not a counterparty or service provider for any Grayscale product. As a result, Grayscale products continue to operate business as usual. Recent events have had no impact on product or operations. The assets underlying Grayscale Bitcoin trusts and all Grayscale products remain safe and secure, held in segregated wallets in deep cold storage by our custodian, Coinbase. Grayscale does not borrow, lend, rehypothecate, or otherwise encumber the product's underlying assets, and the custodian for the assets is prohibited from engaging in such activity. Publicly quoted products continue to trade and produce SEC and OTC markets reports and audited financial statements. Additional information about Grayscale's products, custody of assets, and service providers can be found in the reports available at grayscale.com/SEC and grayscale.com/OTC-documents. So they've now broken their silence, but trying to process there. This just came out 9 minutes ago, right? Tweeting at them yesterday after they've been silent for 7 days. Why, if Grayscale has had no problems whatsoever, why was Grayscale so silent too? So I don't know. They have finally come out and said something now that Genesis Trading has suspended redemptions and loan originations. But I don't know why it took Grayscale 8 days of silence when we know how frequently they tweet over here on their Twitter. So why have they been silent the whole time? I don't know. And it's hard, right? Because I want Grayscale to be fine, right? Like, you don't want to see that guy go down at all. You want that guy just completely fine. But unfortunately, the trust in the cryptocurrency community when it comes to these major players is that this is what we hear every time. We hear everything is fine. And then in a matter of days, suddenly everything is not fine. So, take it for what it is. At least we have seen them make a statement here, but it was after 8 days of silence. So, otherwise, when it comes to SBF or Sam Bankman-Fried, I'm not going to go too deep into this. I wrote another write-up for the premium newsletter yesterday. It was fully covering what's going on up until this point with SBF, or at least compacting a lot of the things that have actually happened to get kind of a clearer picture of what's going on, at least from the information that's provided to us. We know there's a lot of rumors out there, and whether the picture is clear or not, we'll find out as time passes by. But of course, he's been kind of interesting over here on Twitter with his what happened, and then not legal advice. Yeah, okay. I'll get to what happened, but for now, let's talk about where we are. Of course, the thing about this is he's like putting a lot of time between these. There's hours that are passing between these things that he's doing. So he's up to something. There's some game being played here. And then, to the best of my knowledge, it sounds like kind of playing I didn't know what was going on with everything. Like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this stuff was happening, which is better than saying you did it with malicious intent, right? So I think that's kind of the card that's getting played in here. But the scary thing about this in here is last night he posted, a few weeks ago, FTX was handling $10 billion a day of volume and billions of transfers, but there was too much leverage, more than I realized, running the bank, and market crash exhausted liquidity. So what can I try to do? Raise liquidity, make customers whole, and restart. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe I won't get anything more for customers than what's already there. I've certainly failed before. You all know that now all too well. But all I can do is try. I failed enough for the month, and part of me thinks I might get somewhere. Of course, this coming out here sets off alarms, because earlier in the day, Rand Neuner tossed up a softball question to Kevin O'Leary that if Sam Bankman-Fried was to start a new business, would you back him? And Kevin O'Leary answers yes. And then last night, he announces that I'm going to try to start over again, and I'm looking to raise money and raise liquidity. So the whole thing is just wild at this point. I think we're just kind of in the thick of it still to see what's going to happen with remaining players, what's going to happen with SBF. And like mentioned, a lot of things got broken through here on Bitcoin. So, question still remains, is this kind of our initial break? Is this where you kind of get your initial break and the things, the contagion like we had back in here, contagion really sets in right now. From a technical perspective, when I look at the Bitcoin price chart at this point, I don't see any technical reasoning for this to be the bottom in here for Bitcoin. I would say the only thing Bitcoin has going for it at this technical level currently was just the amount of volume that showed up in here. But that could have been mass liquidation breaks that happened in there. As for the altcoin market, sitting at the location that it's still at, still holding the June lows somehow, some way through all of this, looking like the Wyckoff ending that we had there back in 2019 and 2020. So kind of all just sitting on the edge of our seats right now to say, is there going to be another break? Of course, the most frustrating thing about this all is that we've got a big fat downturn happening here on the DXY after going parabolic for the last year and a half. We finally have a break happening here in the DXY. We could see that on the RSI. We could see that happening over here on the MACD. We had watched this as it had all these reactions at the actual fib levels occurring in here, getting rejected, finding supports in it, and then finally reaching up to the end and then watching it waddle around in here. And sure enough, we finally get a breakdown happening in here. Historically, this is good for the cryptocurrency market. I've been through the entire 2018 bear market, and we never had anything happen like this. There was no Luna UST collapse. There was no FTX collapse. I mean, you had a few things here and there, but nothing that you were like, wow, this is devastating to the cryptocurrency market happen. And so looking back on this type of situation where you have someone this big fail, and then you have so many other companies that are dependent on it, and we see them one by one continue to come out, the only experiences in this market where there's been contagion in this market to look at is right here. And this went sideways for 30 days before the contagion started setting in again. I think really, the only dingus thing we can look at to be like, hey, here's some optimism in here. As we know, we followed this thing the whole time. We saw the crumbling happen. It had its paws out. It has essentially gone very close to the same depths at this point now from the peak of it. Let's get it really lined up about as close as you can get right in there. Maybe somehow, some way. But, the problem with it all is just for Bitcoin in particular, this looks very similar to what happens before things just kind of get moving a little bit further down. We know that we've broken through the last retracement level here on Bitcoin. We know that we've now deviated away from every bottom that has happened from 2014 and 2018. All the technical indicators, every single one of them, at least when it comes to moving averages, oversold RSI, MACDs, weekly time frame, monthly time frame, they've all deviated over here on Bitcoin, including with the 786 Fibonacci retracement getting broken in here. And at the same time, it breaks through the support of the previous all-time high over here on Bitcoin's market cap, which the market cap was what was able to pinpoint, nail that 4.236 extension back in here. So we got a lot of technical damage in here, and there are the worries of the contagion stuff in there. So, you can find a couple of things to be like, hey, high volume, that fractal has finally gone full distance. But, there's a lot of things that are different now for Bitcoin compared to 2014 and 2018. We don't have an ABC correction that has brought us down this far. Moving averages, relative strength indexes, MACDs, market structure of the fall. This does not mimic 2014 or 2018 from both price behavior and from technical indicators. So it does create the concern that Bitcoin's in something much bigger. And it doesn't mean a relief bounce can't come out of here. One of the reference points we've talked to all year on whether or not is Bitcoin doing just a similar correction that it's done to past ones, or is this going to be the biggest one in Bitcoin's history where it goes and takes out the 2018 lows? And so you sit here and you see this, you say, it's awful, right? And we've pointed to Ethereum a lot as having the same thing. You pretend this is Bitcoin back in 2018 through 2020, right? You have crash, retrace, reaccumulation happening in here, breaks out. What happens? It breaks through the previous all-time high, finds support in here, and goes back in for retracement to finally go on and hit below the low that was set back there. So the point being is that while we sit right here, it's a very difficult read on Bitcoin. We could talk about all the differences of what is happening right now compared to both these, because I know a lot of people are looking for 12 to 14K to be the bottom, because that's a similar distance of what we did in the past, right? You look back to this, we've talked about the super cycle of Bitcoin. We've outlined that this was the whole same thing all the way up here. We were talking about, we were screaming back in October and November of last year for the top coming in. And then we look to how deep it ends up pulling back in here, right? It pulls just back down to the retrace level right in here. So for Bitcoin, that's going to be this whole area right in here, $12,000 to $14,000. It's going to give you your similar pull down that will happen in here. But if you're looking for some type of technical behavior to show similarities to how these bottoms happened in here, well, one, look at the 200-week moving average. We have stepped even further away from it. It's one thing to be like, get underneath of it, but hey, we're able to break back in. But to step further away, that is certainly different than how we've behaved in the past. Same thing goes for crossing of moving averages in here. Every time these things have happened, hey, the bottom had already come in already. Now we've gone even deeper, so X that out, and that doesn't matter anymore. Can't use that anymore. Look over here on the monthly time frame of what's going on to see that every time that the MACD crossed itself or it flipped down in here, we can see once it flipped, the bottom had already been in for Bitcoin. Look back to 2018, 2019, once we flipped, hey, the bottom was already in for Bitcoin. Hey, look in here in 2022, we've already flipped. No, bottom's not in. So even on monthly time frame indicators, we're not acting as we have in the past. So to use these things, we can't use them anymore. So then we have to start kind of theorizing, well, what is playing out here for Bitcoin? What do you make of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 happening in here for Bitcoin, rather than having in 2014 and in 2018, both of these, they fall 70% for an A leg, they bounce 100% for a B leg and go on into a C leg, which is what happened in 2018 and here in 2017 or 2014. You have a 70% crash, 100% bounce, then go on into C leg. We don't have that here for Bitcoin here in 2022. So by moving down one more leg, we say, well, we can't use ABCs. We can't use those. We can't use the crosses of the moving averages. We can't use the 200-week moving average as a support. We can't use dipping into oversold on the weekly RSI as being the marker to say the bottom is in, even though it did in 2014 and in 2018. And then on the monthly time frame, we can't use the MACD because it doesn't work anymore. So the thing people are really hoping for here is merely just the percentages. Can we do what we've done before? Flip us to an easier to see time frame in here. Get all those moving averages off there. Can we just pull back down into the same price level in here, which was the retraced level that we had in 2013 when we had the 2014 and 15 fall? That's going to be right here. The only problem with it, or the main problem with it, is that it's the only thing we can hope for there. It's the only thing you can say is that the percentages are going to be good enough. That'll be it. We'll be done. However, we won't have any technical signals of what we've seen over the last decade for Bitcoin to indicate that it is. So we're in uncharted territory right now. You're not in uncharted territory for the depth of the fall, but for price behavior to say it's going to find a bottom and we're going to continue a bull market, we're not showing the same characteristics of what happened both times in here. And so that's the challenge that we're dealing with right now. So with where we are right now, it's hard to present a case either way. When we're up here, when we're holding the lows, when we're holding on top of the previous all-time high here for Bitcoin, you have a lot of cases in here, right? You even have that this is actually just a retracement of the entire move from C19 as a pinpoint nails that last retracement level. Now every retracement level has been broken in here of the entire run that we completely had. So there was tons of cases to present in here for how Bitcoin has behaved historically to say, it looks pretty good. But what we have to recognize is all of those things have been lost. And so when searching for a bottom right now, none of these things can be used anymore. You kind of just got to hold your breath, close your eyes, and pray to God. That's it. Retrace level holds. But we won't get these signals in here as we did in the past down in here, just because we're already way below them. These things have already all happened, and we're still keeping on going. The thing that the altcoin market still has is it still has Wyckoff accumulation going on in here. And so when I look to Bitcoin, I don't see the capability of being able to read what the market's going to do next just by looking at Bitcoin, unless if you're just going to say, we got to go 85% because we've always gone 85%. Doesn't matter what all the technical indicators are doing. Doesn't matter the structure and how we get there and do it. We just got to go 85% because that's what's baked into the code. We have law of diminishing returns to the upside. That's why our bull run was small, but it doesn't matter because we still have to do 85% crashes every single time. That's hard for me to accept. But if I were to look at data anywhere and say, hey, is there optimistic data anywhere? It would be right here at the altcoin market cap to say, hey, this thing is still holding. That's good. Is that why we're seeing something different happening here on the Bitcoin dominance compared to past bear markets? Past bear markets for Bitcoin swallows the dominance, gets way up here. No one in their wildest dreams would think that, here you are, there's the market top to think that Bitcoin dominance would still be sitting here way deep into it at this much time, right? That the dominance should have risen up. The dominance should have risen up, but that there is absolutely something different at play with Bitcoin in here. But if we move back over to the model that we've used for the last couple of years in here and how Bitcoin had reached its peak over here and it reached its bottom over here, right? Obviously in this model, where did it pull back into? It pulled back into these areas right in here. Again, if you lean on that model, you're not going to get any of the same signals at that level that we got back in 2014 from technical indicators. You're not going to get any signals in there that are the same because every signal that happened in this moment has already happened. So, then it comes to the point, are we discrediting too much of what happened, right? I mean, is just the absolute collapse of the FTT token and FTX and the contagion, is it all playing a role? Is that just going to make it too hard to read right now? And that's possible too. And that's one thing that makes me uncomfortable when doing these things and seeing how many things have broken already in here. And like we're mentioning, Grayscale being silent for 8 days. Today, they've come out and finally said something. But if they were not impacted, why did they take 8 days? Just a weird time in the market. Weird time. Right after everything's happening with FTX, it's all just like, holy cow, this stuff is so shocking. This is so crazy. What is actually happening here? This is madness. Then it kind of settles in for a minute and you kind of say, all right, well, where the tornado has now come through and done all the damage. What are the pieces that we have to pick up? Or was it not a tornado at all? Was it a hurricane? And we're actually in the eye of the hurricane right now. And we're about to go through the backside of the hurricane again. But as the FTX collapse happened in here, we see big technical damage done over there to Bitcoin in regards to 2014 and 2018. All those indicators are out the window now. The altcoin market still holding without setting a new low. But we know when Luna and UST collapse happened, there was contagion that came out later. Other things did fall. And just while we're in this moment, I've got to think realistically, those things can still happen because it took 8 days for these guys to come out and say that they were okay. That's weird. We know some companies are coming out and saying they're okay, then overnight they're not okay. In 2018, when we went through that bear market, we didn't deal with any of this kind of stuff. You had like your BitConnect and, nothing crazy. You had like the Bitcoin Cash ABC versus Bitcoin Cash SV, right? You had ICOs selling off their Ethereum. We didn't have like large companies and large exchanges collapsing on themselves. And we're having to kind of learn how to deal with it as it happens. Fortunately, Grayscale says they're okay, but it did take them 8 days to say it. I'm not super convinced about the Bitcoin price action happening in here, even though it does have almost nearly the depth of what we had back in 2018's fractal. It has finally almost gotten there. For those who've been watching the channel for a long time, we went through a long period of watching this, then things started to kind of get themselves a little bit different in here. But, was that the pause and that the final push? Hard to lean on that. But, you see it in there. If I'm just trying to show you the optimistic things in there, you got that, and then you got super high volume. So the volume that you saw there on Coinbase was higher volume than C19. It beat out C19 sell volume. So pretty climatic for sure. So those are like your optimistic things. But the bigger problem is all the other things that we talked about, all the things that make it deviate away from 2018 and from 2014. And then, trying to learn a lesson, right? When we saw what happened with Luna and UST, it took a month. And then things still kept going. So it's kind of definitely one of those things where I'm unsure in this kind of moment and definitely am more of a spectator when it comes to Bitcoin. When it comes to the altcoin market cap, it has still maintained that Wyckoff accumulation structure. If it takes out the low, well then guess what? It's not anymore. But as of right now, it is. But should we go set new lows? Hey, throw it out the window too. But as of right now, we're still lined up. And like I mentioned last week, right? Like I try to lean on like 4 different qualities and try to keep them balanced within myself. 25% of it of me being grounded in reality, 25% of me being a conspiracy theorist, 25% of me being smart and methodical in the decisions that I make, and then 25% of me having to be just plain stupid in order to keep me completely balanced in environments like this, because you use your logical sense right in here. And I certainly do. Like I think to this moment of where we're at right now, we just saw Bitcoin take out the retracement levels. Bitcoin's deviated away from everything back in 2018 and 2014. You have a couple of things in there with high volume and with, that fractal that look good, but we're talking about moving averages. We're talking about relative strength. We're talking about MACD. We're talking about price structure and behavior and Elliott waves. All those things do not look good for Bitcoin. And then we're also talking about contagion risks and everything like that. And thinking, all right, so this is the place I'm supposed to be buying, right? It's like, what are you're typing way too into that stupid right now, blockchain backer. You're kind of like leaning 85% on stupid right now. And then and then remembering C19, right? And that's what happened right in here, right? We're going into lockdowns. People didn't know what was going to happen to their health, right? It was just like absolutely silly and dumb to consider buying the market back then. And I remember buying it back then thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is going to be terrible. But to remember in this moment, how awful this was. This is C19. This is stock market collapsing 2,000, 3,000 points per day. This is people panicking to go buy toilet paper and paper towels, thinking they're not going to be able to leave their house for a couple of weeks, right? But the market recovered from that moment back there when the panic was happening, and we only went up from there. But if you would have asked anybody logical, they would have said, no, we're definitely going lower. And that the market certainly has that feel of that way, with the worries and concerns of contagion coming up next. But we do know in why this Wyckoff action, it was met with a very scary moment as well. And so we're met with a very scary moment in the market right now. I don't know all the risks in regards to contagion and what dominoes could fall and what those particular things could mean. But I do know that when we had this moment back in here, it was certainly a scary moment. It was very worrying that things were not going to improve. But sure enough, it did. And it took some time, but essentially just kept going and going and going from there. That marked the end of it. The absolute worst event in the entire several-year period happened at the end of the Wyckoff. And, are we being met with that right now? We'll find out. But we're certainly being met with a very interesting time right now. And it's very difficult to know how to handle this situation. I'm going with the flow like a lot of people are. Fortunately, I treat this as a full-time job. So I'm in here researching, I'm reading, I'm on Twitter, I'm reading articles, I'm watching videos, trying to keep myself up to date with everything all day long. So it's not like I'm only dedicating a couple hours to this. This is all day, every day for me. So I'm trying to relay everything that I find whenever I find it. And at the same time, trying to if it seems so like a rumor or something like that, do I cover that or not? It's a balance, but we'll keep going through it day by day and we'll see how things go. Otherwise, I'll start wrapping this thing up for a Friday update. Today's Wednesday, right? I think it's Wednesday. Yes, it is. For Friday updates, I usually fill you guys with a little bit of fluff. I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, I'm pretty excited about it. I got a free 75-gallon fish tank. Whoop, whoop. I mentioned that last week that I need to get a bigger tank. I got a 75-gallon. So I've been operating on a 3.5-gallon and on a 13.5-gallon. But I've done such a good job taking care of these fish that none of them die. All these little babies, I catch them, I move them into another tank, I baby them in there, and then they grow up. And so my population has exploded. Good news, I got a 75-gallon tank. I'm hoping to have that thing fully going within, a few weeks. It just depends on if I need to cycle it hard or not. It is a used tank. I didn't go out and buy a new one. I did get it for free. Very grateful. Other quick updates. I did add to the newsletter yesterday the collapse of FTX. Tried to go through some of the main talking points on what has happened here with the fall of FTX. It also includes a 19-minute audio recording, so I do read this. I know some of you guys like to listen to it in the car while you're driving and just have me read it to you. So I think that's one of the cool things about this that is added in there. Also over there on Twitter, with the help of the incredibly talented Jude at Jude Hey 2, did show like the making of the blockchain backer NFT collection. I haven't mentioned that much this week. It's been a weird time to launch an NFT digital art collection in the thick of this moment that has been happening here. So just, trying to respect the situation of what's been happening in here. But I added that. I'll play that for you guys here another day. Otherwise, you can go to Twitter and check that out. That is still available there at OnXRP. Links in the description to both the OnXRP site for the digital art NFTs and for the newsletter. Otherwise, I'll wrap this thing up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.